All right, we're going to get started. For those who don't know me, my name is Amanda. My name is Amanda Kitson. I am finishing my pathology residency here at University of Michigan and will be headed to Keesler Air Force Base at the end of September. I grew up in Garfield Heights, Ohio. I graduated from the high school there in 2008, and then I went to University of Toledo and did degrees in biology and women's studies, and then stayed there for med school and then came up to University of Michigan. So I had the idea for this conversation just after kind of looking at some of the things that I saw going on in my community on Facebook and through the news, and then some of the experiences that I've had here at Michigan. And I was lucky enough to bring some of those people together for a conversation today. So you'll be hearing from 4 different people. The first is Jasmine Deskins from the Marion County Public Health Department in Indianapolis, Indiana. We'll be hearing from Magistrate Judy Jackson Winston from the Cuyahoga County Domestic Relations Court, who is also a social worker and author. We'll be hearing from Dr. Adrienne Crawford Fletcher, who is also a Garfield Heights graduate and is the Assistant Dean of Diversity and Inclusion at Case Western, as well as Assistant Professor of Applied Social Sciences. And lastly, we'll be hearing from Dr. Alicia Wilson, who is my program director here at the University of Michigan. She's also Director of Forensic and Autopsy Services here and conducted the independent autopsy of George Floyd. So for this conversation, the audience will be muted. The panelists are able to speak with each other. We're not going to do a Q&A, but I encourage everybody to just sit back and listen. So we're going to get started with Jasmine. So Jasmine is a 2007 graduate of Garfield Heights High School and now is a REACH health educator based in Marion County Public Health Department in Indianapolis, Indiana. The Racial and Ethnic Approaches to Community Health, or REACH program, is one of the only CDC programs that explicitly focuses on reducing chronic diseases for specific racial and ethnic groups in urban, rural, and tribal communities with high disease burden. She is also a recent Master's of Public Health graduate of the Richard M. Fairbanks School of Public Health at the IUPUI, where she earned the William M. Platter Civic Engagement Medallion. Jasmine is more than passionate about advocating, educating, and empowering communities through health education, promotion, and disease prevention. In her spare time, she enjoys being a dog mom, an LGBTQ+ ally, recently serving on the board of directors for Indiana Pride of Color as Health and Wellness Director, and dedicating her life to social justice and equity for all. All right, I'll turn it over to Jasmine. Oh, don't forget to unmute yourself, Jasmine. There you go. I forget.
Yeah, I do forget. Hello, everyone, and good evening. So first, I want to say that these opinions are my own, and they are not affiliated with Marion County Public Health Department. However, I do work there, and a lot of my work is dedicated to African-American communities and making sure, of course, as Amanda shared, that we reduce chronic disease burden long-term. So should I just share my story, Amanda? Or, okay.
Yeah, go ahead and just get started wherever.
So as she said, I am an alumni of Garfield Heights High School. That's kind of where it all began for me. Garfield Heights High School, what can I say? Well, I'm glad I got out of there is what I can say. And through blessings and my parents and supportive friends and professors, I made it to the University of Toledo. So it's kind of funny, Amanda and I both ended up there at University of Toledo, where I was a tour guide and things like that. I will say that early on, I think that I'm a different person. I'm certainly outgoing and things like that. That Garfield made it very hard for me to exist as a person, and likely a person of color. Specifically, I can remember there used to be one Black cheerleader a year. And now you go and you see tons of people of color because it is more diverse. But through my kindergarten through 12th grade, I went there, and it was just not a really good experience. I often felt misunderstood, and rather than teachers trying to help me, I felt that teachers putting barriers in place. A lot of implicit bias before they probably knew that was a word was among a lot of the faculty, from middle school to high school. And I just experienced a lot of bullying, and I don't, and the teachers did not really support me. But mostly I did notice that if I got into an altercation with a person who was not of color, a white person, specifically I remember one incident where a boy called me the N-word, and I reacted very violently. And I was kicked out of class, but he was not. And I also remember, I have a really great memory. I remember every single teacher I've had. So I also remember there was a time in gym where somebody hit me with a badminton racket, and then I hit them back. I was expelled out of gym for 5 days, and that person got 2. And they were a white male student. Certainly, I don't feel like we were catered to as Black people. I mean, it was great when they had Black students that were successful in basketball, but I don't really feel like they supported my endeavors or really wanted me or made me feel that I was going to college. I honestly, without my parents, I don't know where I would have ended up, because it wasn't Garfield Heights High School supporting me and many of my other friends and things of that nature. Then I went on to University of Toledo, a predominantly white institution. I wouldn't say that University of Toledo was not supportive, but as I think about it, I think the first Black educator I had was in college, and she happened to be in Africana Studies or sociology. I myself want to be a professor, so I'm up here looking at and listening to all of the wonderful Black women that are on here tonight who I look up to, and I think it's so important that Black women are in those roles. But even with a professor I'm close to who is a woman of color, they still make it hard for us to exist in spaces with academia. And it's also very discouraging, where you feel like you don't even want to pursue a PhD because who looks like you in that program or who is supporting you? I had the pleasure of being a part of the minority training program for cancer control research, which my professor told me about, and I went to UCLA. And this program is all about helping minorities, want to work in research. And I just also have a problem with, the distrust in the community as a Black person, where people of color are often not focused on in these studies. Because one, we don't trust the community, and one, what are you giving back to the community? I think that's very important, not to just do research and say, hey, here's our findings and leave it alone, but what are you contributing for long-term success and equity? And, even living in Indiana as a Black person, I don't feel there are spaces for me, especially as a Black professional. And for a person that has a big personality and can deliver certain things, other than that, you don't want me to grow. You don't want me to be better. So it doesn't make me want to be involved in certain things. And it certainly changed my life going on 31 years, and just seeing that there aren't spaces for Black women. And it just is really rough to want to be able to encourage others and feel so discouraged here in Indiana. And some things I feel like I personally cannot say because of my job, but I will say we do have one really great Black woman here, and that's Dr. Virginia Kane. And I don't know if you all are familiar with her, but she is the director of the public health department here at Marion County Public Health Department. And you don't see that often. And Dr. Kane has put her blood, sweat, and tears into Indiana and Marion County with reducing sexual health transmission, among many other things. And her work on COVID has been amazing. But what has Indiana really done to make sure that people understand, other than reporting facts every day, the burden COVID-19, for example, has had on people of color? When people don't feel safe to come out of their homes, and you were last to test this group of people. So it's just been a struggle as both a person that now has a graduate degree and plans on pursuing things further, and finding a space that is for Black women. And I try not to let my past cloud my future. And certainly, I want everybody to understand how important it is to have inclusive spaces for everyone, and not to make it feel forced, like, oh, now you're at the table, but don't speak. Now you're at the table, but we'll hear your ideas, but we won't actually do them. And we get far too much of that. And I often feel like when you do obtain a doctorate, when you are a doctor, when you are somebody that gains an academic, success, that does not mean that you're not Black. That does not mean that your Black experiences are no longer important. If anything, it makes it much harder because people are like, well, that's not you, or that's not you. And as a public health person, why is Indiana number 10 in the United States for maternal death among African American women. And why is nothing being done about it? I think about that all the time. Like, why be better off going to drive 5 hours pregnant to Cleveland Clinic and have a better outcome than living here and risking death? Because there's nothing that is being done about it enough to me as a Black person, and as a public health professional. So that's just kind of my story. I will let somebody else speak because I'm quite talkative. As Amanda knows, I was a tour guide, so I'll let someone else speak. But thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences and perspective. Next, we'll be hearing from Magistrate Judy Jackson Winston, who is the post-decree motion magistrate for Judge Tonya Jones of Cuyahoga County Domestic Relations Court since 2017. She is also a licensed social worker and served as the Client's Rights Officer for the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board of Cuyahoga County for 19 years. She received her BA in social work from University of Akron in 1991 and her Master's of Social Service Administration from Case Western Reserve University in 1993. She received her law degree from Cleveland Marshall College of Law in 1998. She is a member of the Alpha 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 Social Work Honorary Society and is a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. In 2017, Magistrate Winston published her first novel, The Anniversary, which deals with issues involving family and behavioral health disease. The Anniversary is available for purchase on Amazon. And I will turn it over to Magistrate Winston.
Hi. Hello, everybody. It is an honor to be here and to go behind such an energetic young lady. Jasmine, you are awesome. I really enjoyed listening to you. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my story. Mine is a little bit different from Jasmine. I went to Cleveland Heights High for high school. And when I went to Heights in the 80s, it was a very diverse school. While I was there, one of my peers committed suicide. She was African American. She was 15. We had an argument. Right before she committed suicide, she came and she apologized to me. And that is when I decided to dedicate my life to the community and to children. Over the course of my years, I found that people grow up. So then I, started dedicating my life to adults too. But for the most part, I went to Akron University. I had a very great experience. I was very involved in the Black Student Union. It's when I went to Case where everything kind of just went downhill. And when I say that, it means that I did not have a very good experience as an African American female. I was very young. I went right from undergraduate right to my graduate program. I did not feel that I was treated well. I remember I got a bad grade, a C, and I couldn't understand how I got the C when all of my grades were B's. And, I contacted the teacher. She did not respond. Long story short, I sat outside her office and waited for her because I wanted to know, what's going on with my grade. She was very rude to me. She told me that she gave me a C based on attendance that she never took. And when I went to my advisor at Case and told them, that I was very upset, that I felt that I was being targeted in some way because, you didn't take attendance ever. I came to some of the classes, but at the end of the day, you never took attendance. And he told me I need to be really careful because I sounded like an angry Black person. And I did respond that I was an angry Black person who spent a lot of money per credit hour for my class. And I was, wanting to go to where I needed to go in order to make sure that I got the grade that I earned. Not that a grade that I was given, a grade that I earned. And we did have a meeting and she changed my grade when they did confront her on the fact that she never took attendance. When I went to law school, I was the only African-American female in my section. So my professors always knew when I was there and when I wasn't. But we just do what we got to do. But I really have had some negative experiences, but we've also had some great experiences too. And what I want to talk about a little bit is mental health, because that's really what I've dedicated my life to. And to talk about the disparate treatment that you do see in respect to mental health, and getting assistance for people in the community. One reason is so many people from the African American community and other minority communities don't want to go to these institutions because we don't trust the people who work there. And there's good reason for that. You know, in the past, you know, when there would be an issue and social workers would come to our homes, if we were to tell them certain things, they would take our children as opposed to trying to assist us. So what's happened over the years is that we taught our community, you don't talk to those people. You don't tell them things about what's going on in your life. You talk to the people at church. You talk to your friends, you talk to your family, but you definitely don't talk to them. So there is a lack of confidence in our institutions. I am the post-decree magistrate for the Honorable Tanya R. Jones, who is the first African-American domestic relations court judge in the history of Cuyahoga County. And she didn't get elected to 2017. In my course as a magistrate and during my course of working at the Adams Board, I spent a lot of time with minority communities and trying to make sure that we got assistance and help for them. And I want to talk a little bit about what I heard Jasmine talk about. You know, she talked about her, you know, growing up and feeling misunderstood and not feeling like she had a space. And there's a word for that. That's called racial trauma. And you have people who are experiencing that because what's happening is we just had so many microaggressions over the years. It's just built up. And so it makes you feel as though you're being targeted, because sometimes you are being targeted. And, you know, you can have a lot of negative effects from it. So some ways that we can try to combat that is to, you know, what I do is I write. So that always helps me feel a little bit better. You know, but other things that we can do is talk to the people from our churches, you know, talk to people in our groups, our sororities, you know, our friends, and, you know, talk about the experiences that, you know, we're having. Another thing that we can do is to become involved. You know, I'm a little bit older than Jasmine. I'm not going out to protest, I'm honest. Even if I feel a certain type of way, I'm not going to protest. But that doesn't mean I won't give my money. That doesn't mean I won't volunteer in other kind of ways to make sure that we're getting out the message that, you know, we need to stand together and we need to change what's happening in many of our institutions. And I just want people to remember that mental health care and behavioral health care is self-care too. So it's very important that we all take care of ourselves during all of these trying times. We do have a disparate treatment, and one way that we can try to change that is to demand that the people who we pay give us the treatment that's ours, because we pay for it. It's not that it's charity. Somebody said, but you vote, Judy. I do. Every election, and that's something else that we also need to talk about. We need to be strategic and not reactionary. And voting is a really key part of this. You know, we need to make sure that the people who are in power, our leaders, you know, represent what we want. And, you know, when I went to case and I stood up for myself and said, you know, I paid for my credit hours. And I really did make a big deal. They did wind up getting an African-American dean. She was there for many years afterwards, after I actually graduated. And I think that I'm close to my time. I don't want to go over. I'm just telling people also, if you get a chance, buy one of my books. It's on Amazon. I have two, the anniversary and the commemoration. And it's about an African-American family dealing with mental health challenges and how they deal with it. Okay, thanks. And thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about how your book was inspired by some of your experiences? We have a little bit of time.
Okay, good. All righty. You know what? What I found is that so many people were resistant to learning about mental health. So I feel that if you can educate people by entertaining them too, and that's what's one of my goals, and it was very well received. I've dealt with so many people throughout the course of my years. I was the advocate for people, who have behavioral health issues, and I did see people be discriminated against because there's a misunderstanding sometimes of people of color who are dealing with mental health issues as well as drug and alcohol issues. Sometimes it's just a complete misunderstanding. And there are rules and laws that people are supposed to follow, our agencies. And my job was to hold people to that. So that means if you were discriminating, we give you money that comes from our government. We will remove our money if you're, engaged in discriminatory practices. And one thing I should have said before I started my presentation is, just like Jasmine, all of the comments that I'm making here today are my own, and they're not at all attributed to the court or my judge. But so I just want to make sure I give that disclaimer. But I did work with so many people, and I believe that my story, even though it's fictional, is representative of what many people in our community are dealing with in respect to mental health. We don't want to talk about it. It's a secret. And one reason why is, again, is because it's being used against us to remove our children and to harm our families. And so people need to feel like they can be safe so that they can, have an opportunity to express what's going on. That actually helps you feel better. It is when we're holding it all in and trying to act like everything's okay, when we're feeling disrespected and humiliated, that's when we have a really bad time. So if you are somebody who is having negative symptoms due to post-traumatic stress disorder, because we watched over and over, people of color being killed daily on the news, that's a negative, it has a negative impact on us as a community. But if you are continuing to have, or you are having any negative, symptoms such as nightmares, you can't sleep, you're losing weight, you're having severe anxiety, you might want to speak with your medical provider. You might need to get a referral, or you might, again, want to talk to the people, in your circle. But the most important thing is to talk. It's to not hold it all in. And again, I'm like Jasmine, I don't want to just take over. So again, thank you all for having me.
Thank you very much. All right. So next we're going to hear from Dr. Adrienne Crawford Fletcher. So this actually, her son-in-law, Adam Hine, is one of my classmates that we graduated together. So he actually recommended her and wrote this introduction. So Dr. Fletcher, also a Garfield Heights graduate, is Assistant Dean of Diversity and Inclusion at the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences at Case Western Reserve University. Dr. Fletcher holds a PhD from Loyola University Chicago and a master's degree in social science administration from the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences at Case. Her research focus has been on the influence of implicit attitude on decision-making within the child welfare system and the phenomena of disproportionality. She has been practicing social work professional for the past 2 decades with work experience in child welfare, foster care, psychotherapy, Indian child welfare, court-appointed special advocates, and veterans. Previously, an appointment as an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, and her current appointment as assistant professor at the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences at Case have allowed her to utilize her teaching and advising skills and also provide consultation services to agencies regarding issues of cultural humility. Further, she enjoys making herself available to facilitate discussions regarding the intractable thicket of race and culture for agencies and organizations who are aware that they are unaware. It is Dr. Adrienne Crawford's Fletcher desire to continue her research, which seeks remedies for the malady of negative implicit attitude among service professionals who work with individuals who are often marginalized, poor, physically exhausted, and emotionally challenged. And I will turn it over to Dr. Fletcher.
Ooh, thank you, Amanda. I am so happy to share this space with you, Jasmine, with you, Magistrate Winston, and with you, Alicia. And I'd also like to thank you, Amanda, for your allyship, because it means a lot. So thank you. As Amanda said, I am also a graduate of the Garfield Heights Senior High School, and that was a very interesting experience, which I'm going to share with you now. And I'd also, first of all, like to say that these are very difficult times, and while they are difficult times, they are also a time that we can take advantage of. Perhaps they are a time where we can, as we are attempting to do right now, turn the tide toward social justice and turn the tide toward anti-oppression. And for the few moments that we're together today, hopefully we can all share some words that lean into that direction. So first of all, as a student of the Garfield Heights school system, I was on homecoming court. And while that was a great honor, I was not the most stellar student when it came to academics. I can honestly say I sincerely struggled with math and science, and reading was not one of my areas of greatest academic success either. And it was because of that, in my graduating class of 300 people, that I was near the end of the trail. While I was not ranked last in my graduating class, I was in fact near the end. And it was because of that, when I sat down to have that conversation with my guidance counselor, who shall in fact remain nameless at this point in time, she suggested that it would probably be unwise for me to consider college. And that was, of course, wholly based on analytics, which was at that time the Ohio Achievement Test. I know that I am dating myself. Some of you may remember that, but it was based on the Ohio Achievement Test and my class rank. So she suggested, dear Adrienne Crawford, college is probably not a good idea for you, and you should probably consider a trade, right? Which actually shamefully suggests that individuals who do seek trades probably don't require much knowledge, right? So that is actually a pretty shameful suggestion, because we know that those individuals who pursue trades actually do require much knowledge, right? But that was her suggestion to me. So in that moment that she looked at the analytics, my class ranking, my Ohio Achievement Test numbers, that high school guidance counselor held my future trajectory in the palms of her white hands, as they were. Her words held life and death, right? Thankfully, I had other words whispering in my ears, and hopefully and thankfully, my life trajectory was held by other individuals. Those individuals were my parents, of course, Frank and Marie Crawford, who had already informed their daughter, Adrienne Crawford, that you are, in fact, going to college. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter that you struggle with math. It doesn't matter that you struggle with science. We are here in the wings to help you and to push you forward. And thankfully, I made that application to the University of Cincinnati, and I waved goodbye to my parents, and they looked in the rearview mirror and they waved goodbye to me. And my first quarter, at the end of my first quarter at the University of Cincinnati, I earned, I should say, a 3.75 GPA and was on the dean's list, right? So what happened during that first grading period, during that first semester there at that university, was I discovered myself. and I discovered my learning capacity, and I discovered the way I learned as an individual. So that experience at that college taught me so much about myself. And like many others, for the first time, I saw instructors who looked like me and who instilled life in me and who believed in me and who told me that I could succeed. So I know that we're going to come back around and we'll have an opportunity to give recommendations to educators, but my experience as a high school student at Garfield Heights Senior High School was one of limitations, if I could use a single word, right? But thankfully, there were other people whispering in my ear telling me that you will be successful. So thank you for this opportunity, Amanda.
Thank you very much. And we definitely will circle around because I want to hear recommendations. But I do want to hear from Dr. Wilson. So Dr. Wilson is my program director here at Michigan in the pathology department. She received her BS in medical technology from Michigan State University in Lansing in 1999 and MD from University of Michigan in 2004. She completed her residency training in anatomic pathology at U of M and completed a forensic pathology fellowship at the Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner Office in Miami, Florida in 2008. Following completion, she served as Deputy Medical Examiner of the Genesee County Medical Examiner's Offices based in Flint, Michigan until 2012. During this time, she participated in a broad range of medical legal cases, including child death investigations, homicides, serial death investigations, and provided expert witness testimony in various counties in the state of Michigan. Dr. Wilson also held active teaching roles in Flint and serving as part-time faculty at Mott Community College and co-instructor of the Autopsy Assistant Certificate Program. Dr. Wilson returned to U of M in 2012 as faculty supporting the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office based in Detroit, Michigan. Due to an academic interest in pediatrics, Dr. Wilson completed an additional fellowship in pediatric and perinatal pathology at the University of Michigan in 2014. She currently holds a faculty position at U of M, serving dual role as Deputy Medical Examiner for Washtenaw County Medical Examiner Office and as a surgical pathologist in pediatric pathology. Dr. Wilson is active in numerous medical, legal, pediatric, and community committees and is the past president of the Michigan Association of Medical Examiners from 2017 to 2019, chair of the State of Michigan Committee on Child Fatalities, chair of Washtenaw County Child Death Review Team, co-founder of the Washtenaw County Suicide Death Review Team, and member of the Michigan Maternal Mortality Review Committee. Her areas of interest include sudden death in infancy and childhood, pregnancy-related deaths, and suicides in the pediatric population. In addition, Dr. Wilson's strong passion in medical education, mentoring, and teaching roles continue as she also serves as the program director for the pathology residency training program. And she's helped really redevelop the curriculum as we had moved from UH, the main campus, over to NCRC. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Wilson now.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Can everyone hear me? Thank you to the speakers who preceded me. You know, what's amazing is that when you hear other stories, when we share our stories, the similarities, I won't go over in detail in my story, but much of it is the same as what we've heard before. And people are surprised when I tell them the story that I almost didn't end up in college. It was a few things that pushed me, as particularly my mother, encouraging me, many obstacles along the way. But just thinking back to that 16, 17-year-old girl with so much potential who just needed a chance, right? So when, you know, Amanda asked me to do this, I didn't have anything prepared. I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about. As I was going through one of my files, I came across something that I wrote about a year ago, actually, that I feel is very fitting, that I would like to share with this audience. It's called All Things Being Equal. Ceteris paribus is the Latin translation. I feel it's fitting to what we're talking about. and it's entirely my perspective. Over the course of my career, I have often heard the comment of others regarding diversity and inclusion. Most of the time, given the environment, it is from non-underrepresented minority groups. Most of the time, it's off base and offensive. Most of the time, it highlights the lack of understanding of the obstacles underrepresented minorities face in medicine and in the United States in general. And most of the time, I remain silent. For many of us, practicing in these environments elicits a self sort of preservation response, and we want to avoid being labeled. We want to avoid being labeled the angry Black woman, or, oh my goodness, here they are again, another Black issue, another diversity issue. Being the sole underrepresented minority in a department can feel lonely and can potentially be disastrous for your career if the wrong words are spoken at the wrong moment. At some point in the journey, though, you've seen enough and you've heard enough and you want your voice to be heard. Last year, I was on a search committee for a high-level position. There is a standard question regarding the opinion of diversity in the workplace and the candidate's prior experience with recruiting a diverse workforce. One candidate responded that all things being equal, they are strongly for hiring for diversity. And it immediately rubbed me the wrong way. As really many of the other answers from all candidates had rubbed me the wrong way. But this particular answer was given with such conviction and confidence that it caused me to ponder for several days, and that's when I wrote this piece. When I hear the phrase, all things being equal, I'm reminded of a cartoon that I've seen before. In the cartoon, there's a race. The race is between a white man and a Black female. The male appears polished and relaxed in his suit at the start of the race. The path ahead is clear. There might be a few curves and a few bumps here and there, but pretty much it's clear and unobstructed. The Black female appears as though she has already been through a battle. She has bandages and abrasions, and she's all beat up right at the start of the race. And she's in this fierce, running stance like she's ready. Her path is far from obstructed. In fact, there are hurdles to jump, there are boulders to move, mountains to climb from start to finish. I, like many others, have made it to the end of the race. At the end of the race, what people see may appear equal, but it's far from equal. The diploma we receive may be equal, the titles we get may be equal, but the experiences, the insight, the attributes of determination, willpower, and faith far exceed what most non-minorities can ever imagine. I feel if we're waiting to the end of the race to select for diversity, we've missed the point, and I believe we'll never achieve our true goals, especially where I am in academic medicine. At the end of the race, by this time we have our wings. We've learned how to navigate the system. We've learned the ins and outs and what to do and what not to do. And we have accomplished something very few have. A much better time for selection is while we're on that treacherous path. While we are in need of support, direction, assistance, jumping over the hurdles, moving the boulders, climbing the mountains. The most often thing that I hear against this sometimes is that it will be lowering the standards. I disagree. I feel this is just one part of ensuring equity. On that path, I had the same potential I do now. It was always there. I just needed to have the opportunity to show it. And understanding that and ensuring equity in all of our endeavors, I feel is key to building and sustaining a diverse workforce. The next comment sometimes that I hear too is that we looked, but we couldn't find a diverse pool. And I think that's in part because we're looking at the finish line. Only a minority of a minority can actually make it across that finish line in our society. let's explore and build our pipeline while they're on the path. Or better yet, let's not even put them on that path. What can we do to ensure that that young woman at the beginning of the race is as healthy mentally and physically as others, that the challenges that she faces are comparable to what others face? I think, you know, when we can envision that and work towards that is when we will start to see equity in our education, and especially in academic medicine. I am often disappointed how, you know, all things being equal is typically said when it's time for job selection, new opportunities, promotion, but not during the course of the race. More focus needs to be on that and incorporating the concept of equity and diversity in our conversations for us to truly achieve the phrase ceteris paribus, all things being equal. And I know we're going to circle back, but I just want to share one story about why I feel, you know, helping others along that path is so important. I recently came into the limelight, you know, for doing the second autopsy on George Floyd. And I'm a forensic pathologist at heart. I love my job. I feel this was, you know, something I was meant to do in my life. But the experience and why I love it so much started back when I was 17 years old in high school, and very few people know this. I had a teacher who took an interest in me and signed me up to do an NIH minority summer research experience. It was a lot of things that I saw and participated in, but one thing stood out to me is that I was with a PI who was doing research on rats. He had large rats. We were doing some research on the rat. Part of his research is that he took the heart out of the rat and he did experiments on it. And so during one of the sessions I said, well, what happens to the rest of the rats? We had like 10 rats that we were taking the hearts out on. And he said, no one else wants them. They'll just be incinerated. And I said, can I look inside? And he said, okay. And he not only let me look inside, he gave me a table and he said, get her some tools. And he gave me all these little tools. So what I would do after they did their research is I would sit there and dissect the rats. I had no idea what an autopsy was. It would be 10 years later. But I remember that feeling of looking inside, of doing the organs, taking them out. I just loved that experience. And it would be, you know, like I said, a decade later before I even knew what an autopsy was. But it was so much power in linking that experience for me. And so that exposure very early on is extremely important to helping us discover what we could be, the potential that we have inside of all of us. And so from that 17-year-old in a Detroit public high school with this one opportunity to doing the most high-profile case in our recent history, to me is just amazing because it started, you know, with someone helping me and assisting me in a way that they would never know the impact that they would have. And so that is my recommendation to people who are listening. Everyone talks about this. Mentor, find someone, the African Americans who you work with who, you know, are in college, mentor them, show them things, be a part of their growth and development. And that I feel will be the key, and it's very important to the success of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. So I just want to circle back around and see if anybody wants to give any recommendations before we finish up. We have about 15 minutes.
I would just say, like, certainly one thing that stood out to me from Dr. Wilson is potential. And I think because so much implicit bias exists for Black women, especially a woman like me who has a lot of personality and is automatically seen as sassy or automatically seen as loud, but really, before I started growing in my professionalism, I had at the top of my resume, be the change you want to see. And I truly do believe that. I think I started off in school, in undergrad, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a gynecologist, actually. I wanted to deliver babies. And then I remember that I was told, well, you won't make it because you're not in the calculus circuit. And I think at the time I was like, well, dang, like she didn't even try to encourage me or help me, and it was a specific advisor at the University of Toledo. So then I switched to nursing, and I was like, well, I'll just be a nurse. But it was Dr. Timothy Jordan and Dr. Tavis Glassman at the University of Toledo in the health sciences that really changed my life. I went to a health careers class, and they just made me always feel wanted as a student. I can talk to Dr. Glassman even now, almost 10 years later, and he still wants me to succeed. And I think that showing an interest in a student helps them discover themselves. Putting opportunities forward. And I think the most important thing to do, and that's why I want to be a professor. I knew I would not be a good teacher because I'm not about to deal with these kids' attitudes. And I was like, well, maybe college students are a little bit more serious. They paying for this. Sometimes Dr. Crocker is like, but I also have a professor now that's in my MPH program, Dr. Sula Hood, who again connected me to the research opportunity at UCLA. And it just really changed my life. It made me feel like I want to do research. Like I didn't like writing papers, but now I understand the intent behind it, and to do things that don't exist, that I've been thinking about and mulling over. And if it wasn't for those integral professors that helped change my life and helped me change direction, I would say I was made to be in public health. I love educating. I could talk about public health all day. I'm all about wearing my mask. People get tired of me on Facebook. And I'm just all about that. And I think that it's really important that educators know that they change lives and we don't forget you. And so when you take that interest into a student, even I think Amanda saw it, I even talked about a 6th grade teacher I had that connected me to animals. Mr. Caruso, I still remember him to this day. And he's still teaching. I'm like, is he supposed to be retired? But I've messaged him, and actually Ashley Thomas got my message to him, and it was tons of students who said they inspired him. And it's teachers like that you remember for a lifetime that made you feel like out of all of these students, 300 students, that you matter. And I think that just make sure somebody know that they matter. And that's kind of what I have to say here is just, it feels good to know that you matter and that you are making a difference. So thank you.
So my recommendations are this, and thank you for that, Jasmine. And I do remember Mr. Caruso. I remember him. Number 1, realize while quite powerful, race is simply a social construction. It is made up, right? And I would hope that over the course of my lifetime, Americans would realize it as such. Number 2, realize as educators, we must take the time to educate our bias, educate ourselves about our biases, unpack our biases, really examine them, our biases toward Black folks, Latinx folks, Native American folks, in general, people of color, those negative biases. But on the other side, we need to really also examine our positive biases toward white students and also Asian students who we consider the model minority, because what happens is these two things collide and they create this detrimental environment in the classroom. So we need to examine both our positive and our negative biases, right? Because they create this awful synergistic piece in the classroom. So we need to examine both our negative and our positive biases in the classroom. We need to realize as educators that our words hold power, the power for life and death. And we are speaking life and death to the students and also to their parents. We are looking at analytics as the only way, as the only probable way to assume whether or not our students will succeed. Analytics are simply a slice of the pie. And we want to look at the whole individual. If my guidance counselor had looked at the whole of me, she would have been able to see the probability of an assistant dean for diversity and inclusion, or an assistant dean at a university. I'd also like to make the recommendation for just a few books, if you would just bear with me. My reading list includes a book by Ibrahim Kendi, which is How to Be an Anti-Racist. Another book is The Condemnation of Blackness, Race, Crime, and the Making of Modern America, and that's written by Khalil Gibran Muhammad. Another book is White Fragility, which is written by Robin DiAngelo. Another excellent book is The Everyday Language of White Racism by Jane Hill. And each of these books, while they don't deal specifically with education, they give an overview of how to help us deal with our own internal racism. So the titles, again, very quickly, are The Everyday Language of White Racism, White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and The Condemnation of Blackness, Race, Crime, and the Making of Modern America. And lastly, How to Be an Anti-Racist. So thank you for letting me make those brief recommendations.
I just wanted to say that, like you all, I wanted to give some advice to the educators. I've had some amazing teachers and professors throughout my years. One is Dr. Ackerman from Cleveland Heights. She was my principal. She was just awesome. As well as Dr. Rubinsky. One reason why I'm a writer is because Dr. Rubinsky encouraged me so much and told me that I could, even when other people may have said I couldn't. And, you know, I think it's really important that what many of the ladies have said here today, we need to just remember that words do matter, that you can't just look at one factor in order to try to make a determination on where somebody will go in their life. And we do need to mentor our young people. And I'm just so proud of all of you guys. And, you know, really, Jasmine, I'm just like you, Jasmine. Very, very big personality, very outgoing, and that is okay. And that's great. And so you just keep being you, because you are wonderful, as you all are. And I just want to say, I told you guys about my books, the anniversary and the commemoration. I forgot to say, I have a pen name, and that's JJ Winston. So if you go under Novelist JJ Winston, you'll find my work. Thank you.
All right, anything else anyone wants to add? All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening in. I really appreciate it. This will be recorded and posted on the University of Michigan Pathology YouTube, as well as Michigan Medicine YouTube. And I just really encourage everybody to just continue to listen, continue to read. If you see something that's wrong, really start to speak up, and just stay on the right path. And thank you everyone for joining us. Have a good night.